International Women's Day to everybody.
Yeah.
And everybody, sorry, go for it, Ivy.
And don't worry if you get a notification or an invitation to be a panelist, you won't be asked to jump in. It's more like if you want to turn on your camera and join us so we could see all your lovely faces, that would be amazing. And also you can unmute yourself later on if you have any questions. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Hi, Azadeh. We can already see you. We see Bex coming in. Hello. Joe, hello. Good to see you. Yeah, so please turn on your camera. Please feel free to turn on your camera. It will be great to see you all.
Oh, it's amazing. We have everyone from all over the world, just always great. Mumbai, India, if you want to tell us where you're from, where you're dialing from, that would be amazing.
Yeah, feel free to pop it in the chat. We can see it. Oh, this is so exciting, isn't it, Ivy?
Yeah, my hands are sweating. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so shall we, anyone else? Where is it? I'm just reading the text. Hi, Kit Ping from Hong Kong. Bex in Hong Kong. Oh, it's semi-lockdown. Don't worry, we're also in isolation at the moment. Yes, we'll make Joanna, Switzerland. Thank you so much.
Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you for joining us, everybody. So I think everybody is still dribbling in.
Yeah.
And maybe while everybody is dribbling in, I will maybe introduce myself already for the ones who don't know me. So my name is Anne-Carine. I am one of CMA's MCC students and also student support and coaches. And yeah, I'm so excited to share this virtual space with Ivy today, faculty member Ivy, and share some things with you on stepping boldly outside of your comfort zone and into your growth zone. And I also want to give a big shout out to Ivy, because you can't see it while you're looking at her, while you're watching her, but actually she has COVID at the moment, so she's physically outside of her comfort zone, and she's still here. So I'm so grateful, Ivy, that you're here. So a big shout out to you.
Thank you. I'll try and make sure that my pitch is high and I don't sound like a guy. Not that it's a bad thing, but it's, you know, just so it's easier for us to understand me. Thank you. All right. Just wanted to welcome everyone from Myanmar, and also sorry if I'm a bit foggy. That's not normally the case. So I'm Ivy Padilla, and I'm based here in Wellington, New Zealand, soon to be moving to Queenstown and joining Anna Karian. So very excited, and lovely to see our amazing faculty, as well as Azadeh, Joe, Sarah, and Dr. Ben is also here with us. Amazing. So if you could just turn on your camera if you want to join us, and we'll go through the list and make you all panelists as well. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off, and we'll share our screen and we could kick off. It's amazing.
Wonderful. Yeah, are you happy, Ivy, to dive in with showing everybody 2 video clips?
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah, no, that would be amazing. So as Ivy said, we're two Queenstown ladies. So we have 2 very special video clips to show you. So this is me, actually. When I turned 40, I wanted to dive into my 40s with an open heart and with lots of bravery. And I can tell you, it took a lot of bravery for me to do this bungee jump, because I have a big fear of heights. So yeah, here I was supposed to wave to the audience, but I was really too afraid. I was really holding on, and I asked the instructor to push me, but he said he was not allowed. So there I went myself. I did it. I dived and I dangled for a bit.
Yeah, that was intense. I wanted to do that, but I only got to do this bit. So there's a little bit of sound for this one. Let me just, this was actually back in probably 10 years ago.
You better put your dancing shoes on.
Hey, Ollie. Hey, I'm Ben.
And then how am I going to do it?
going to stand like that.
Yep. Then I'm just going to jump off.
Not yet. We're going to take a photo and hook you on.
Interlock your fingers together, only so you go palms facing. Interlock palms facing.
I always wanted to go to the Philippines.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of something for what we kind of put ourselves up for.
Yes, we thought these clips would be a good introduction for today's topic, because stepping out of our comfort zone and into our growth zone, it is scary, isn't it? It does feel a little bit like diving into the deep. And even though we take, all kinds of measures to be safe and secure, we're diving into the deep, and that is scary. So in today's session, Ivy and I will be sharing a personal story. Ivy, would you like to start first?
Sorry. Sorry. No, you go on ahead. I guess for me, what I'll be sharing with us tonight is more of our adventure stories and the lessons I've learned stepping into the scary unknown, So for us, we reframe those words into more of an adventure. And we kept seeking it, we've noticed, and we'll be sharing those key life-changing moments with you today and how we overcame them or approached it.
And I am sharing a story after being thrown into the unknown. So Ivy is the one diving and I'm the one being pushed down. And both scenarios, they happen to us sometime, with different levels of intensity. Sometimes we are brave and we take that step into a direction we're scared to go. And sometimes we're pushed or we're thrown into a situation that really scares us. And that also requires us to be brave. But whether we step into the unknown or whether we are pushed or thrown into the unknown, one thing is for sure, we grow, we transform, because outside of our comfort zone, we learn. This is our growth zone. So I will start with a little introduction on my story and on how I was thrown into the deep. So in August of last year, my life was turned upside down when my 8-year-old son's body was diagnosed with 4th stage non-Hodgkin Burkitt lymphoma. So my boy Lars, he had been unwell for quite some time, for over 2 months, and we had visited 4 different GPs, and they all came to the conclusion that Lars must have a tummy infection that just seemed to be lingering on. And then the last GP, he wanted to do a final ultrasound to confirm this diagnosis. So Lars and I, we went for an ultrasound and we went home afterwards. And this ultrasound, that made all the alarm bells go off. So an hour later, I was called by the medical center that this was an emergency and we had to go to the hospital straight away. And then there, the word lymphoma, so cancer, was mentioned. And a few hours later, Lars and the whole family and I, we were on our way to Christchurch Hospital, which is 6 hours away from our hometown, Queenstown in New Zealand here. So all of a sudden, like really all of a sudden, our whole lives were turned upside down and changed. And we were in the car and on our way to Christchurch, where Lars and all of us would spend the next 6 most challenging months of our lives. So I would love to share some lessons with you that I learned as a mother of a child battling cancer. But before I do so, I want you to know that now, 7 months later, so 7 months after the diagnosis, you see Lars here as he is now. He is completely healed. We are back in Queenstown. Lars is happy, at least most of the time. And he has gained weight. He's easing back into school, playing again with his friends, biking and hiking. And his hair is actually growing back at the moment. And he's all fired up to start his own charity to help other kids with cancer. So there's a happy ending to my story. So we wanted to start with some background, because when something big happens, we go through different stages. And big things, they can come in different ways, in many, many ways. So It can be an ending of a relationship, for example, or for example, the loss of a job or a business, which happens to a lot of people during the pandemic. Or, you know, as in our case, you know, receiving a medical diagnosis of a loved one. So in our lives, we are thrown into the deep in many, many different ways. And when we are thrown into the deep, and when we dive into the deep and into a new world, we are grieving the loss of the familiar world. We lost our familiar world. So for me, the new world was a world with Lars battling cancer. And I was losing my familiar world with a healthy boy and happy family life. And for everybody going into a growth zone, it is like the bungee jump or the canyon swing, isn't it? We leave behind the platform, you know, on the bridge where our feet, you know, feel the solid ground. And we are entering this new world where we're then dangling in the air and we miss and we grieve the familiar world. Now, grief has been studied deeply, and because of that, we know exactly what to expect. And the model we would like to use today is the one developed in 1969 by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Kubler-Ross identified and she summarized 5 stages of grief that accompany any form of loss. So whether it is a job loss or a medical diagnosis or an accident or whatever. And Kubler-Ross, she charted the stages as a model that provides a map for our experience. And the great thing about this model is that it gives us both a structure to our experience, but also a sense of meaning to our emotions. Here you see the model of Kubler-Ross. But as we're going to consider these 5 stages of grief, it is important to note that people grieve differently. And we may or we may not go through each of the stages or experience them in order. So the lines of these stages, they are often blurred. So we may move from one stage to the other and then possibly back again, and you know, before we fully move into the next stage. And also when, you know, often when something big happens, we often go through the phases multiple times, because often big challenges don't consist of one challenge, do they? So with my boy, for example, to give you an example, there was the initial diagnosis, but then there were, you know, many medical challenges along the way where we were hit again and again and again and experienced the cycle all over again. And also, I want to mention that there's no specific time period suggested for any of these stages. So someone may experience the stages fairly quickly, such in a matter of, you know, in a matter of weeks, where another person may take months or maybe even years to move through a place of acceptance. And it's all perfectly normal. So when we are thrown into the deep, we will experience this grief cycle. And the first stage, maybe we can bring up the slide again, Ivy. The first stage is denial. And I experienced this big time, I can tell you. At the end of Lars's healing journey, so just before we left Christchurch back to Queenstown, I was reflecting back on the first day we arrived at the hospital with the nurse who had originally showed us around the ward. And I had been in shock. So the nurse said that on that day, I looked like a possum in the headlights. And I think that's a very good description of how I felt. You know, walking around there, and there were all these kids with bald hair, you know, with bald heads, and it was just surreal to be there. And I was definitely in denial. I kept saying, you know, that the GP really thought it was a tummy infection and they really needed to further test Lars. And it took a while for me before I came out of this shock state. But this is often what we do, isn't it? You know, when we enter a new unwanted world, you know, whether it's receiving a medical diagnosis or, you know, when our partner breaks up with us, or we have a financial crisis or a job loss or whatever, we often deny it. We put our heads in the sand and we think maybe there has been a mistake. You know, in the denial phase, we're not living in this actual reality, but we're living in the preferable reality. But interestingly, it is denial and shock that help us to cope and survive the grief event. So denial, what it does, it really aids in pacing our feelings of grief. So instead of becoming completely overwhelmed with the grief, we just deny it and we do not accept it. And then we stagger its full impact on us at one time. So you can think of it as our body's natural defense mechanism saying, hey, there's only so much I can handle at once. So our bodies they do this on purpose. So it's pretty amazing, actually. So denying and putting our heads in the sand, it serves a purpose. Well, then we go to the second stage you see on the chart. That's anger, and also under this stage falls frustration, irritation, anxiety. And I was anxious, very anxious. I was so afraid of losing my boy. And when you think back about something big that happened in your life, whether it was a job you lost or a relationship that ended or whatever, there is often a phase where we feel angry or upset or frustrated or irritated or anxious. And this is also a common stage to think, why me? And life's not fair. And this is actually a natural stage and also an important stage in the process, because when you experience a grief event, you may feel disconnected from reality, that you have no grounding anymore. Like, we saw with the bungee jump or the canyon swing, your life has shattered and there's nothing solid to hold on to. So you can actually think of anger as a strength to bind you back to reality. So again, this stage serves a purpose. And then the next stage you see here on the chart is bargaining. So when something big, something bad happens, we often start to bargain with God or spirit or whatever it is that we believe in. I don't want to attach any names to it, but we say things like, please, if you heal my boy, I will do whatever you want me to do. Or if you give me back my job, I will never complain again. And I even found myself, bargaining with my boy. So I said, when you get out of the hospital, you will get a puppy. It was so funny. We had the puppy discussion, probably like many families, many times in our family. And I had always said, like, I love dogs, but, we're not going to get a dog because, such a big responsibility. And, who's going to walk the dog? And I had always had these reasons why we wouldn't get a dog. And then, so then we were in Christchurch, and a few weeks in, Lars was going to have his birthday. He was going to turn 9. And my oldest boy, Vigo, he said, why don't we give Lars a voucher for a puppy, so he can bring home a puppy when he's better. And I said to Vigo, that's such a great idea. And all of a sudden I could just think of all the reasons why it would be great to get a puppy. But I really think that this is also an example that falls under this stage of bargaining, because in a way, this stage is also, it's false hope, isn't it? Because we falsely make ourselves believe that we can avoid the grief through a type of negotiation. If you change this, I'll change that. And we do it because we're so desperate to get our life back, our life from before the grief event. And so we're willing to make a major change in an attempt back to this normality. And guilt is a very common wingman of bargaining. So this is when we endure the endless what if statements. So what if I had left the house 5 minutes sooner? The accident would never have happened. Or what if I had challenged the doctors more? The cancer would have been found sooner. So you get the idea. And then the next stage is depression. So depression is a very commonly accepted form of grief, of course. It really represents the emptiness we feel when we are living in reality, in the new world. And we realize that our familiar world, it's gone. So in this stage, we may withdraw from life. We may feel numb. We may live in a fog. We may not want to get out of bed. And the world may seem too much and too overwhelming for us to face. It's a very difficult phase. But I think we can all relate to this to some degree. We probably have experienced this to some degree, or at least we know someone who has experienced this. Fortunately, this stage does not last forever, because then there's the last phase that is identified, and it's the phase we want to get to. It's the phase of acceptance. So not in the sense that, hey, it's okay that I lost my job, or it's okay my husband died, or it's okay that my relationship ended, or it's okay that my son's body has cancer, but rather this is happening and I'm going to be okay. So in this stage, our emotions may begin to stabilize, and we re-enter reality, and we come to terms with the fact that the new reality is our reality now, and we're okay with that. So it's not a good thing, but it's something we can live with. So we're moving forward emotionally from the world that we left behind. So it is important that we allow ourselves to go through the grieving process and to be compassionate with ourselves. And I really have to admit here, I feel like I haven't been through all the stages yet. So recognizing that is important too, because then we can do something about it.
Thank you so much, Anna Karen. That's such an inspiring story. So just going to share and segue also into my story. So you might all, if you have seen Ben, you might be familiar with that turtle analogy. So with everything that happens to us, just like in the animal world, you know, the snakes, snails, aliens even shed their skin or shells to give them room to grow. Other crabs, you know, like hermit crabs, they look for bigger shells so that they can grow bigger. But for the turtle, the turtle shells never really falls off, and it's never too large or too small, because what happens is that shell of the turtle is part of the turtle's ribs, cage, and spine. So it's attached to its internal bones and the body of the turtle. But as you grow, the vertebrae grows with you. And then that's the kind of the same with what I could relate to with a turtle shell, you know. So a couple of examples where I sought for discomfort in stretching myself. I'll just share that with you. Is for example, so that range varied from everything that was new to me, and everything I wanted to do, and everything that I didn't have really much experience with. So that's from doing a show for the very first time, a theater show, and I've never done musical theater, but I was like, you know what? The only thing that they could tell me is either a yes or a no. So what's there to lose, right? If it's a yes, then I get to do it. Then I'll worry about it later. If it's a no, then at least I learned how can I be better for the next one. So the other part of that, when I said yes and I actually got it, is the scary bit of that is actually having to change in front of about 25,000 people to the bare basics. That was never part of what they told me I was gonna do, but shared it with everyone else. It was all a part of being on stage. And other things that I've thrown myself into is jumping off of mountains. So because that's what they are there for, right? To jump off of. So from swimming with sharks and stingrays in open water and jumping off of cliffs, there's a lot of water elements. And one of my discoveries there actually is that I had a fear of drowning in enclosed spaces. And that was specifically, I found out when we went spelunking. So that was when the water hit the ceiling of the cave. And I just had to swim and trust that the other person would just find me. And clearly he did, because I was here. I'm here with you today. So I'm sure you're wondering, why do you do it? So just hang in there, and I will share with you what I've discovered as to what is it that I keep doing, that I keep inducing from these experiences. But perhaps the biggest jump we've ever had was back in 2020. In the midst of the uncertainty and the crisis that we're currently still in at the moment, is that we chose to live differently. So we purposely left the comfort of including comfort of our own home country, as well as the corporate world, and ventured on our own. So I'll just hang in there. I'll still share with you later on. In the meantime, it's all cliffhangers, hey? So I'll pass it back to Anna Karian.
Yeah, oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Such an amazing life. Yeah, let's move on to one of the jewels of challenging situation, and that is the revelation of our programs and our habits. You know, when we started our core training at CMA, for me this was a few years ago. I remember Dr. Ben, he came online and into our class just to say hi. And he talked about, when we are into our own stories, that we can't see the part of the iceberg that is sitting under the water. And that as coaches, we want to lift the iceberg above the water so the client can see. And I had to think about this during our time in Christchurch, because when something big happens, it's almost like everything becomes amplified, like everything becomes bigger, like and including our own habits and our own programs. So for me, it was almost like the iceberg was being lifted a bit, and some programs became more clear. So without doing any coaching or any counseling or whatever it is that we do, to see our programs and self-improve. It's almost like war, in war, when it's about life or death, and you're not going to think anymore about whether your shoes fit your outfit or something. So things become really more clear. And to give you an example, I have a strong victim mentality. And with this, I don't mean that I tend to think negatively, but what I mean is that I am vulnerable to my outer environment. I remember a few years ago when I visited, I went to Sydney for a talk to listen to Eckhart Tolle, the great Eckhart Tolle. And I remember him when during his introduction, he was saying that it was so great to be in this really busy city of Sydney and being such a calm presence in this busy city. And I can definitely relate to that and being calm. But when I'm really honest, I must admit, so I'm here now in Queenstown. People who know it, it's beautiful. Nature is abundant. There's mountains and there's water. And being here in this environment, it really calms me down. Whereas when I'm in a hectic environment, it does have an impact on me. So that's what I mean with a victim mentality. I'm not Eckhart Tolle yet, but so anyway, so when things are good, I am good, and when things are not so good, this has an impact on me. So I'm very well aware of this, and I've been doing lots of work around this to stay centered. But when I was in Christchurch, I noticed that my feelings were very much connected and tied to my boy's condition. So when he was not well, I was not well. And when he was well, or when he had received good news, like, after his first chemo, it had an incredible result. And I was over the moon, I can tell you. I was baking pancakes for Lars and for all the nurses and for all the people in the Ronald McDonald House. So my victim program really showed itself. It really rose above the surface. So this is one of the things that I consider to be one of the gifts of big events happening to us, because it really shows us our programs and also where we can develop, because we get a better awareness of how we work. So it doesn't get resolved, unfortunately, but we get the awareness so we can work on it. So for me, I will just definitely keep on working to stay in my center. But what about you? Have any programs or habits surfaced for you after a big challenge? And this is something I would love to invite you to think about.
And if you want to share, that's a great question, Anna Karian. So feel free if you want to jump in and unmute yourself. Something that you're kind of you're working on. like just to add personally, for me, all those things that we shared, I shared with you, that's a little bit because we don't have all day, is I thought it was my rebellious side. You know, when my mom or my parents would tell me you can't do it, I was like, the more I want to do it, you know. But reflecting on it over the years, I actually found out, it took me about 38 years maybe. I found out it was actually my curiosity. It's like, what makes it so important for them to say don't do it? Or what's behind the reason as to why they don't want me to do it? You know? Eugenie, I see your hand up. Did you want to share, please?
No, I wanted to listen to you also, actually. But I'm very interested by this subject, just because I moved from 3 different countries. I think I'm like you in the way that I'm very curious, and but maybe I have been too curious in marrying someone who was not for me, basically. And so what surprised me is that even though I tried to fit in for 14 years, I was thinking, like, is the trying can the trying be as efficient as escaping? Because for me, I always wonder why I cannot fit in when I try, but I can recover, be resilient when I stop trying. And neurologically speaking, I feel like it should be the same process usually, but well, that's my thought. But when you mention like being in resilience, or what kind of stage you can go through after when you make the decision to give up, basically, I was wondering if any one of you heard about the dark night of a soul.
Yes.
I've been like, you have? God, I'm so
Yes,
happy,
yeah,
because I
yeah,
feel
yeah.
so lonely, I can tell you, because I studied, I read about like the burnout, the depression, and all this, and it was not fitting. But then all of a sudden that came out, all this information, and said, yeah, that actually ticks all the boxes. Please do share with me. God, I feel so
Yeah.
happy.
Well, we can definitely talk about the dark night of the soul. But maybe shall we leave this for a little later? Shall we continue
course,
that discussion afterwards, so we can just move on through the rest of the program? But yes, for sure, Eugenie, please hang after, and we can have a talk about that for sure.
Sure.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ivy, for bringing up the rebellious side as well. I think we can all relate to that. But first, let's move on to working through discomforts. So, you know, how can we work through discomfort? What are some tools we can use when something big happens and when we are out of our comfort? So for me, the main thing was to try to stay calm, to get my body out of fight or flight and into a calmer state, or at least reduce the stress, because I have to be honest here as well. I have spent most of the time in Christchurch in fight or flight, but there were definitely moments I was able to reduce the stress. And I think being able to calm down when something big happens, when we are out of our comfort zone and experience stress, that this is one of the best things we can do. So what are some of the things that we actually can do to calm ourselves down? And so we're really in the best place to deal with a challenge. What are some of the tools? So the first one is heart focus. We wanted to talk about heart focus. So for me as a mother with this strong victim mentality, so really connected to the state and the condition of my boy, one of the key things I used to deal with the stress and to try to calm down was staying in my heart. So really focusing on my heart. So not in my head, because that was spinning, but in my heart, and breathing from that place and tapping into a feeling that all is well. And this really served as an anchor for me. Ivy, would you like to say something as well?
Thanks so much, Anna Karen. No, I could totally relate, because I'm very, I know I'm a self-proclaimed empath, but I think everyone around me would say, yes, you are feelings-based. And I actually find that empowering. So for me, I know that challenges are always going to be there. And I've discovered that one of the deep-rooted questions that perhaps informed my attitude towards all the challenges is that weighing what is more important for me. Is it overcoming the challenge or experiencing the outcome? So it's not necessarily achieving the outcome, but it's experiencing the outcome, being in that space. So that's what I thrived in. So what's this freedom that I wanted, you know, the rebellious side, but really it was the curiosity and the freedom to be able to do it. So, you know, I've always wondered, what does that mean for me?
Beautiful. What a beautiful insight. Yeah, let's move on to the second two, embrace the flow. So yeah, a few weeks before we went to Christchurch, I picked up the book, The Untethered Soul of Michael Singer. And shortly after, I also read his book, The Surrender Experiment. I don't know if anybody read Michael Singer's books. Yeah, I see some hands going up. That's wonderful. Well, the timing of reading these books for me was perfect because Michael Singer, he's a, you know, a big man like Eckhart Tolle. You know, he's really someone who lives in flow with life. He really trusts in the flow of life, and he really embraces the flow of life. And he's going really, really far with this. So to give you an example, he let people build a house on his land without his permission, without paying him. And he even let people live in his house. You know, the people didn't even ask him. So anyway, Michael Singer was a big inspiration. And I also tried to trust the process and believe that all of this was happening for something good for Lars and for all of us. And trusting that it all served a purpose. And to me, this was vital, that there is a bigger meaning to all that is happening. So instead of thinking that we are victims, but at the same time, I also have to be honest, because I was definitely challenged here. And sometimes it just felt impossible to go with the flow. It was just too much. But if we can, it's great if we can, if something big happens, to take a step back from our minds into our hearts and embrace life and events and embrace and trust the flow. Ivy, I'm sure you have something to share.
How can you tell? So for me, it was embracing the flow. For me was assimilating, especially moving to a country, you know, it's now 13 years ago. To be honest, and this is terrible, I didn't even know where New Zealand was in the map. My husband said, let's go to New Zealand. I was like, yeah, let's do it. Where's that? But it was an adventure. It was something different. I saw it as, oh, we'll always be tourists. You know, we'll always see new things. So I do have a question, and just feel free to raise your hand, is who has gotten a gift and never opened it? If you could raise your hand. Who has gotten the gift and never, Irene, how did you, you've gotten the gift and you never opened it? Very interesting to find out. Have you opened it now, years after? You have, so you eventually opened it, okay. So I guess the reason I was asking that is that it's like getting a gift and you don't know what's inside until you've opened it. It's that curiosity. It's like, what is in there? You know, for me, that was a relentless push. And going back to the decision on 2020 is when I embraced the reality of, we've been preparing for this for 4 years. Now it's right in front of us. Now I just have to bite the bullet and do it. Because what's all the preparation for if we're never gonna do it anyway? So yes, we went with the flow, but we made sure we know what body of water we were in, and we had the right resources to be able to go with it. So that's how I can relate to the embrace with the flow.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Ivy. Yeah, then the next tool we wanted to share is meditation. Meditation is a tool to calm down. I think we all know that. I think we all know that it's good for us and it helps us to center ourselves and to calm down. But in reality, I think many of us don't have or make the time for it, and especially during challenging times. And as for me, I'm a big meditator during normal times. I would have like this really strict routine about meditating. I would really get up every morning between 5 and 5:30 and meditate for at least an hour, and then even at night would add some more. But when I was in Christchurch, my whole meditation routine, it just went out of the window. And yeah, that's just the truth. But I was able to replace it with different meditations. But the meditations I used were much, much shorter, sometimes only like a couple of minutes. And many times I just used them to release stress and tension from my body. And I also didn't stick to a routine. I just did them whenever I could. Lars and I would often meditate together for just before bed, for example. So meditation is a tool to calm down, and there are thousands of ways to meditate. You really don't have to sit like a Buddha. Meditation is really something that can be useful for us during challenging times. But I just would like to invite you to be kind and gentle to yourself and see how meditation could fit into your day when something challenging happens. So any form of meditation, and it is okay if you stick to really short meditations. It is okay to only do them when it suits. And if it doesn't suit at all, that's okay too. Ivy, I know you meditate as well.
Yes. When I first heard about meditation, everyone saying meditation, I said, what's this meditation? Just being quiet, isn't it? And it's like, how am I going to do that with my brain? My brain just goes so fast that when I'm having conversations with my husband, I thought I've already said what had in my head. And he was like, you're in 3 different worlds. I don't know what you're talking about. But, I discovered transcendental meditation, and I gave it a go because I knew I needed that headspace. And we were only doing it like 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. And this is, real story, is it felt like I had another 8 hours, added on to my day. And you don't feel like you were tired because it takes you somewhere, and it's if you're getting charged, but not sleeping. So I needed that because at that point, well, actually until now, we were juggling 4 businesses, and I also still had a job then. So, and I think my family was still here, so I still had to look after them. I knew I needed that because I need to top up myself so I can give to others as well. So that's just a little something.
Wow, no, that's a big something, Ivy. That's a big something. Okay, so let's move on to the next tool, and that's it's a very easy one. It's a deep sigh. So a very easy tool to reduce stress and to invite in calmness and centeredness. It's basically our body-brain's natural way to release tension and to reset our nervous system. So simply, maybe we can do it all together, simply breathe in fully through the nose and then out fully through the mouth, and then longer on the exhale. So this is, I love this because, we have to breathe anyway. And it's something so simple. It's so easy. And we can do it anytime, and it works.
It's funny because when Anna Karen mentioned that to me, it's like, that we had something similar. So if you have, when we do musical theater, and of course, when you're going to either public speaking or going on stage, you get really nervous, right? Like, even if I've been doing it for years, I always get nervous. Even this, get sweaty palms, sweaty feet, sweaty armpits, still happens. And it's totally normal because we care about it, what we're doing. So one of the techniques that my vocal coach would tell me is if I'm about to go on stage or do a public speaking thing, is I inhale and I exhale on a hiss. So it's in between your teeth. And you could actually slow down your heart rate that way. And I was so curious about this initially that I actually slowed my heartbeat down to about 64 beats per minute, just to be sure if I can do it and if it's for real. And it actually does work. And sometimes, even if you just step out of what you're doing, we've been staring at computers for far too long nowadays. Still, there's a benefit of being able to get in touch with each other, but you have to give your time away from it. And that's another tool you could do to just give yourself a break.
That's such a great and practical, easy tool. That's amazing. Yeah, and the next tool is nutrition. Yeah, it is important. We all know it, you know, when we want to be calm and when we want to be centered. And the truth is that bad foods, they add physical stress to our bodies. And unfortunately, when we are experiencing challenges and we are stressed, we tend to make nutritional choices that can actually increase our stress levels. But healthy foods, on the other hand, they energize our bodies. And I think we all know this, but for most of us, including myself, you know, there's a gap between knowing and doing. And yeah, I can tell you, so when we were in the Ronald McDonald House, for example, there were almost every night, there were these beautiful volunteers and they were cooking the most beautiful and comforting foods. And even though I normally tend to go for the healthy foods, now I really noticed, you know, I was really going for the comforting foods. And one evening I even found myself cutting off a piece of ham, even though I don't eat meat, but you know, then I did. So again, we want to raise the awareness that nutrition is important, and that good nutrition, it increases our energy, while bad nutrition, it depletes our energy. But at the same time, it is important to be gentle and be kind and compassionate towards ourselves if we let go, especially when we're out of our comfort zone.
Yeah, totally. Speaking of being out of the comfort zone, is in nutrition. I've actually been vegan for about 6 years now, turning 7 years. And the reason why I say out of the comfort zone, because my husband turned vegan first, if it's like a vampire, turned vegan first. And then I walked in one day and he was watching this video about animals. It just so happened that what I saw was, the segment that I saw was of a dog. Right, the next day I was vegan and I've never looked back since. And what I've noticed is that I am happier. And you know, when you eat so much, you feel like it's here and you're like, you just want to sleep. I know I eat a lot. Let's just say it. Like, I eat a lot. I've eaten my husband. So that's how much I eat. But I've never felt that same way with the change in what I eat. Doesn't mean I haven't eaten some junk food. There's still some vegan junk food. But what it does is it has given me a place where I'm happier for some reason. Like, it doesn't bug you as much, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So food definitely has both a physiological and I guess psychological with great effects. Like my husband doesn't have insomnia anymore. I don't get migraines anymore. So like, it works.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. So the next tool is shifting posture. So anytime we move our body and we shift our posture, and we also shift our physiology, which in turn, it shifts the activity of our autonomic nervous system. So we can use movement to shift our emotions and our mood. So for example, if we're feeling scared or nervous, research has shown that if we take a pose that expresses the opposite of that, so like putting your head, your hands on your hips and your chest out and your head held up high, this will actually make you feel more confident. So even if you only do it for 2 minutes, it's called the power poses. Probably lots of you have heard of it. So when we are out of our comfort zone because of a challenging situation, and we are experiencing a state of fear or a state of anger or sadness or any other unwanted emotion, what we can do is try to shift our posture. So really just let our body move into a posture that expresses the emotional state we want to be in. So to counteract what we are feeling. And I did this in Christchurch. What I did, I was trying to move into a posture of of a mother of a cancer survivor. So instead of walking and rushing around as the mother of a child battling cancer. But I really must admit here that even this simple exercise felt hard. I remember coming out of the supermarket one day, and I was trying to walk behind the trolley of as the mother of a cancer survivor. And I looked at some seagulls that were trotting about, and I thought, like, wow, they have such better posture than I do, because they were so confident and so proud. So anyway, shifting posture into a desired posture and state, it is something we can do. It is a tool. But also here, we have to be kind and gentle and compassionate towards ourselves. Ivy, I know you have lots to share here.
Can you tell?
Yeah.
Also in posture, I guess to share is one of the tips that they teach us is grounding or anchoring. So if you could touch in between your shoulder blades, yeah. Now the thing that they tell about anchoring or grounding is you try and pull your shoulder blades closer to each other. And make sure when you touch your shoulder's not up, because you'd notice once in a while, especially when in front of a computer, that goes up. So ground yourself by pulling your shoulder blades together and lower your shoulders. So that's one, because the more, especially with us, like me, I always like this. So pulling that actually stretches also your muscles here. The other place that where we see tension, not just with singing, even with speaking, is in your jaw. So one of the ways that you could release that is, if you want to do it with me, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, is if you lift your face up and just drop your mouth, but not as if you're falling asleep and but just drop it. And then when you should feel this kind of move at the edge of your cheek. Should feel that move. And then when it's dropped, now you lower your face. That should be just loose. Should you like that? Yeah. Now you might notice this in some photo shoots. They're like, that's what that is. It's just a little drop it. So you're not opening it, you're just dropping the jaw. And that's just so you don't have the tension also in your jaw. Because that and the tongue also kind of just makes everything so tense, and your body feels it as well. Yeah.
I love this. That's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. And then the next tool, another suggestion we would like to make to reduce stress and to calm down is exercise. One benefit of exercise is the effect it has on stress. So not only does it pump our bodies full of feel-good endorphins, but it can also help us sleep better and aid in relaxation. So exercise basically takes us out of our heads and into our bodies. But again, let's face it, I think we all know exercise is good for us and it's really helpful in relation to, reducing stress. But most of us feel like, we should exercise more. And especially when something big and challenging happens. Often we throw all our exercise routines out of the window. I certainly did. I have to be honest here again. But even though I couldn't do my normal exercise, that I normally do, what I did try was to implement exercise as much as I could. So for example, when I would go from the apartment to the hospital, I would try to fast walk. So instead of taking the car. So it's the classic, take the stairs instead of the elevator. So again, it is important, to be kind and compassionate towards ourselves in challenging times and not punish or judge ourselves that we don't have the perfect exercise routine, but just, we can be mindful of the fact that exercise is beneficial, and we can try to make the exercise choices when we can and celebrate those positive choices. So instead of thinking we should do more, we really celebrate, when we make a positive choice.
So I'll add to the flip side of that. This is for me, as important as it is for us to move, you also have to be able to be still. So for me, it's my husband calls it the torture device, but it's actually the Shakti mat. So I love doing those things just for, like, we would watch a movie and I'll be lying down on it, and then I'll have to ask him to pull me up because I can't actually get out. And then you'll have all these holes in your back. The other thing too that I love doing for time for myself to being still is salt floats, doing salt floats, because that also helps with your muscles, especially if you've done workouts or done a marathon, or just plain running. So I love massages that actually gives me bruises, because I always tell the masseuse, I've actually had my husband step on my back because I couldn't teach him how to do the proper one. So like, can you do it to me so I know where it is? So it ends up that I end up giving the massage. So massages, sauna, something that you can do for yourself and be still with yourself. I think that's also important, the balance of being active and also being still.
Yeah, so true. So true. So, and then also connections, during challenging times, it is important to stay connected with loved ones, and whether that's family for you or friends or colleagues, it is important to share our experiences. So we feel the connection and we feel we're not alone in this. And connection and the level of connection, that can be different for everybody. So for one, really loves to call people. The other would like to really see people in person. Others, texting, apping, emailing, whatever suits you and your situation. But it's just really important to keep connected, to stay connected, and so you don't feel alone. And also, when you're being challenged, don't be afraid to ask for help. Remember that people really want to help. They really do. But often people just don't know how to help. So important to connect with loved ones, especially in challenging times, and to ask for help.
That really resonates with me, Anna Karen, because when I was young, and when I was younger, I would always I can figure this out on my own. And as we get more mature and we learn, I have benefited from having a number of mentors who I still am in touch with today. And I have an amazing coach who's here with us today as well. And asking for help, I found out asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of growth, because you're asking to learn more. And that saying of two brains are better than one. So you can have as many brains as you can have. For us, we have a power team, regardless of which business that we're working on. We always have a team behind us that has that expertise. And ultimately, what happens is the decision ends up with us, but they're all informed by the team who help us make that informed decision. So asking for help, it's a gift as well.
I really love that. Asking for help, it's not a sign of weakness, but it's a sign of growth. I think that's such wisdom. So these are some tools that can be useful when we are challenged, because something big has happened and has thrown us out of our comfort zone and into our growth zone. But as we were writing down these tools, we really want to emphasize as well that we can sprinkle a little compassion and a little kindness and gentleness onto ourselves, and remind ourselves that yes, using these tools is something we can aim to do. But if we don't, or if we don't use them as much as we like, then that's perfectly fine as well. It's all good. These are just tools, and it's tools, as they say, as the word says, they're here to help us, and we shouldn't punish ourselves if we are not using them. And so just, I wanted to invite everybody to sprinkle a little compassion and gentleness and kindness onto ourselves. And then, onto the gifts. This is really exciting, the gifts that arise out of crisis. Because, during many challenging times, there's so many gifts that come along with challenges. Ivy, would you like to start?
Sorry, okay. Sorry. Gifts that arise out of crisis. Yeah. For me, I've learned that being connected to what I want to focus on and living that mindset has continued to inspire me, and very mindful of the people that I surround myself with, as well as what I read, what I engage with online. Not everyone feels the same way. Sometimes, we're never going to agree on everything all the time, but that's okay because we're all unique individuals. So I remember I used to say in my old job, if I don't know the answer, I will find someone who does. And at least if I was part of that, being able to find an answer for someone else, then I've helped and I've contributed to the moving forward as well. And I'll just add this, and I'm sure you're familiar with this already. Give me a second. The other thing is, so you might have seen this. I know Tony Robbins also mentioned this, and it's also something that we look at when in coaching, and it's something that stems from deep within. So our emotions dictate our beliefs and vice versa, which leads us to the actions that we take. So I guess we have to acknowledge them, and equally as important is to make sure one doesn't always overtake the other. So there's always that time to reflect and take action. So I always ask myself, with this gift now of experiencing everything that I've learned over the years, is what's the importance of finding what I've been looking for, that thrill or that curiosity. I mean, what will change if I just sit and wait? If I don't do anything, that's still considered doing something, right? By not doing something. So I guess what I've harnessed from that is the gift of the power of choice. And we all have that gift and we all have that power. So to make them or to not make them is still a choice either way. And did you want to add anything to that, Anna Karian, before we go to the last one?
No, you can continue, Ivy.
Okay. So I guess for us is, we don't have to know everything. And that's a totally fine place to be in. It's not just about us. It's there are people around us that genuinely want us to succeed, and so do we for them. So as Anna Karian mentioned earlier, is that there's a huge difference between knowing, learning, and doing something. So it's an ongoing journey of learning. It's I'm sure you've had this once or several times where it's like, oh, now I understand what my mother was telling me when they said this, now I appreciate that. So it's an ongoing challenges, brick walls. It's a roller coaster ride of emotions. But part of the game really is, I call it a game because I like the challenge, is choosing the life we want and how we want to live it. And we always have that choice. And how you feel and think influences the way you see things. So we define what comfort or discomfort means for us, and they would all be different. But because you have given it its meaning, that means you also have the power of unraveling it. So I love this, break the discomfort of the uncomfortable. And to go back to what I was doing with all those things that I did, like jumping off, whatever, or swimming with the sharks. And I just didn't think first. I didn't think, and I just did it. And then I freaked out afterwards, but it was fun. So I didn't give the mind a chance to think for some of those situations, but that's kind of how it worked out for me, at least.
Wow, it worked out really, really well, Ivy. It's great. Thank you for sharing all this. I would love to share also two things. I would love to share two things, two of the gifts that I learned as a mother of my son who was battling, when he was battling for his life. And I want to share, these things that are valuable for me as a coach, because we're in this coaching environment. So when we were in Christchurch, I was so worried. I was, so full of fear of losing my boy. And my body, it was completely in fight or flight. And in that state, I really tried to do everything that I could to make things better. So to make my boy better. So when we were in the hospital, one of the things that I noticed, for example, was that the food was not very nutritious. And I thought, my boy's body has cancer. He needs to eat well. He needs to be nourished. So even though I wanted to be with my boy, I also really wanted to get him some good food. So at some point in the first few days, I kind of raced off to the supermarket to get him some good food. But in this fight or flight state, it was very hard for me to think, because this is what our bodies do, right? When we are in fight or flight, we can't think anymore because our bodies are focused on either fighting or fleeing or freezing. So our blood basically goes to our arms and our legs, and certainly not to our brains. And I think you probably, can relate to this, because I'm sure you can probably recall a moment when you were stressed and you were trying to think and trying to make a wise decision, but it didn't happen. And it probably felt impossible to happen. And I was really, really experiencing this. So I was at the vegetable department and I was thinking, my boy needs green beans and broccoli. And I was trying to think what else would be good for my boy's body, what else? But I couldn't think further than green beans and broccoli. So it was very, very hard for me to think what else he would need. And so I was desperately trying to think. And while doing this, I was kind of blocking one of the aisles in the vegetable department. And then another woman, she came to me and she said, in what sounded to me in a kind of like unfriendly tone, that I was blocking the aisle. So I stepped aside and she grabbed something like kind of annoyed, from behind me. And at that moment, I remember thinking, wow, if this woman would know my story, that I'm a woman, I'm a mother who is just being told that her son's body has been diagnosed with 4th stage cancer, she would have addressed me in another way, with much more compassion. But then it hit me. It really, really hit me. And I thought, wait a minute, what do I know about this woman? What do I know about her story? Maybe she has a bad marriage, or maybe her husband died, or maybe someone was very angry with her like a moment ago, or whatever. I don't know what happened. I don't know her story. So who am I to judge this woman and her behavior? So it really got me thinking, not only I realized that other people don't always have compassion towards me because they don't know my story, but I also don't know other people's stories. So it really taught me to have compassion for everybody. And with this, I really mean everybody. So also the person who seems to be rude, and the person who is not paying attention in traffic, or the person who doesn't make room for us, in the gym class, or the woman who is unkind in the vegetable department. So I would like to invite all of us, next time, someone is driving poorly, not to beep our klaxon if this is something what you normally would do, but realize maybe this person is distracted because of something that happened in their life. Let me wave instead of responding annoyed. Or if you're like me, again, honest, even though I consider myself to be a good driver, sometimes other drivers are beeping at me. So also then, remember that the person, beeping at us, we really don't know their story either. So it made me realize again that we really can't judge other people. We don't know other people's stories. And if we would know their stories, we would probably be much nicer to them, so much friendlier. So this is something that I took away from that moment in the vegetable department of the supermarket. And it's something I really like to think of in my life. And then there's another thing, the second thing I wanted to share, and that is connected to this insight. It is a lesson that I noticed when I was walking around with my boy in the wheelchair, a boy with no hair, clearly a boy whose body has cancer. And I can tell you, there's not a single person who didn't greet us. Everybody would say hi. And people would really try to make, nice remarks or tell us things like, hey, did you see the big fish in the pond? Or did you see that beautiful tree? And you know, when we would go into a shop, like one time Lars and I, we went into the pharmacy to buy some nice incense, because Lars didn't like the smell in the hospital. And in the pharmacy, you know, there was this lady behind the counter, and she was really looking for something. And then in the end, she gave Lars a coloring in packet. So she was really trying to look for something to make Lars happy. So what really struck me from these experience of, you know, of walking around with my boy in the wheelchair is the goodness of people. And this goodness, it wasn't only reflected while walking around with my boy, but also by the way that people responded after they learned about Lars. You know, friends and family and colleagues and fake acquaintances, you know, people really tried to help and lift Lars's and also our spirits, and in a way that they thought was helpful. And, you know, because we're here with mainly coaches, I could see people's background reflected in their giving. You know, that, you know, during the core training that we learned, you know, how counselors try to bridge and consultants try to solve. And as coaches, we, you know, we try to help, you know, our clients transform. So how our background basically, it influences how we try to help people. Well, it was so beautiful to see that even in giving and in messaging, this is reflected. So everybody is coming from goodness and has the best intentions, but it is expressed in different ways. So for example, CMA, like Joe Lanigan, I know you're here, Joe, and the Australian New Zealand team, and also Dr. Ben and Maya, you know, they sent the most beautiful pamper packages, and Joe offered free coaching. You know, it's just such a beautiful way, such a beautiful way to express their compassion and trying to help. And then we also have quite a few consultants amongst our friends, and they were so beautiful, but in a completely different way. So they were sending messages with things like, what can I do? You know, tell me what needs to be organized, you know, what needs to be managed. Is there anything at home that needs to be done? Do you need meals? Or, you know, we got a voucher from, you know, for a home delivery meal. So beautiful, but expressed in a really, again, in a different way. And my meditation friends, you know, they scheduled healings and they were meditating and sending my boy love. So again, so beautiful. And again, coming from their background, you know, their meditation and spiritual background. And then there were also people who sent lots of messages, and some, you know, through the whole journey. And then there were people who said, like, I'm not going to bother you with messages. But, you know, whether they were sending lots of messages or a few or nothing, what everybody had in common was that they wanted to be helpful. They were trying to help in their own way. And there is this goodness in all people, and it's expressed in everybody's unique way. So walking around with my boy in the wheelchair and receiving or not receiving messages and parcels and everything, it just taught me how incredibly good people are. And, you know, there's this such a goodness in everybody. So in friends, in family, in colleagues, but also strangers. And everybody expresses it in a different way, but it is there in everybody. So even in the person who is treating us rudely. So even in the person who is misbehaving in traffic, or the one who is beeping at us in traffic, or the person that is vaccinated or not vaccinated, or the woman who asks us, you know, unkindly to step aside in the supermarket, or the woman who is blocking the aisle in the supermarket. So there is so much goodness in people. So I got the realization that challenging times, they tend to amplify things. So not only our habits and our programs, but everything. And I got the gift of seeing the goodness of people. So even in strangers, and that is something I thought it was so beautiful. So these are only two of the many lessons that I learned, but combining these two, so the goodness of people that is really in everybody, and the stories that people have that make us, you know, get to do things and behave in a way we don't always like, and this real goodness that is inside of people. For me, that's an extra inspiration to continue coaching and to get the best out of everybody. because I really believe with coaching, and what I love about coaching, it really brings out the best of everybody, and it connects people back into their hearts and to their goodness. And having seen compassion and this beautiful amplification of goodness in people and even in strangers, and knowing that everybody has their own story, I think we are so lucky as coaches that we have the opportunity to bring out that goodness in people and to connect people back to their goodness and into their hearts, and from that place maybe live a different life and a different story. So yeah, anyways, I'm really, really happy that there's a very, very happy ending to a very challenging chapter in my boys' life and in our lives. And I can't wait to help people connect back to the beautiful stories, you know, by taking them back into their hearts and to who they are, basically. And that's something that transformational coaching does. So this was a very long talk. It's very long, but Ivy, would you like to jump in?
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for that inspiring story, Anna Karen. I mean, it's such an honor to be here and be able to share this space with all of you amazing women. And it's just, I feed off of it. It's just so much great vibe and energy. And knowing that I have this always with me is such a gift. And what I've put down on the chat is a Mentimeter. So if you want to share with us, if you click on it and want to share with us, what are you taking away from today's session? What's that one word? Or if you could think of something that you want to share with us, or if you want to just unmute yourself, feel free to do that. So I'll put on some background music while we do this. Tell me if you can hear it.
I'm gonna send the blood, gonna drown him out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come.
Focus on the heart.
And I'm marching on to the beat I drum.
Yeah, you can tap as many as you want.
I'm not scared to be seen. I'm
Oh, wow.
no apologies. This is me.
Love. Gentleness with self.
So,
True. Yeah.
see the kindness in people, gentleness with self.
Compassion, yes.
There's good in everything. Amazing.
Love this song, by the way. I
know.
Beautiful.
Live with discomfort. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for all your amazing feedback and for staying here with us throughout this amazing hour and a half, almost hour and a half. It really has been our pleasure. I was so nervous, like we were first.
Yes.
Like what?
out of our comfort zone, Ivy.
Yeah, no, definitely. And if you want to stay behind or just chat with us for a few minutes, again, we'd love to thank Sarah, Joe Azadeh, Joe. Just checking everyone. Sorry, I have like 10 million things open at the moment. For staying here with us and for helping Cecilia. I see you there. Hello.
And Eugenie, if you want to stay behind, because I know you wanted to talk about, about the dark night of the soul. So please feel free to hang out and stay around.
On that note, thank you so much for everyone staying. Joe Azadeh, Sarah, did you want to jump in or say a few words?
I would just love to say thank you to both you and Corinne and Ivy. That was such, what a beautiful, inspiring, I want to say authentic, but it was more than that. It was just thank you for for being so real. And for sharing some stories that are not always easy. And thank you for sharing them so that we can learn from you. And I have learned so much. So thank you.
Thank you. And we really look forward to your session and all the sessions, because there's going to be many, many more. So yeah, please register for as many as you can make time for, because there's so much to learn for all of us.
Yes, I'd love to thank you as well, both of you, Anne-Carine, Ivy, for, even though you're not well, for showing up and inspiring us. Nevertheless, you're both two beautiful, strong, loving women, such an inspiration for all of us to walk through any walk in life that life presents with courage, with love and compassion in your heart. And thank you for sharing your gifts that you have received with all of us. Thank you so much for your openness. It was beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Azadeh. And for those of you who, this is a series of celebrating all us amazing women. Own it. Own it. I posted it on the chat. Yes, that's right. Posted it on the chat. And if you want to have a look at also those schedules, please feel free. Would love to have you, love to see you there. And I'm thankful also for the mute button, so you don't have to keep hearing me cough on the background. That's it. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. So we'll just be here if you wanna stay behind. I'll stop the recording. Thank you.
So much,
Have a great
ladies.
time.
Congratulations. Good one. Thank you for being so vulnerable. It was good. It was good.
Thank you.